There is a lot of BlockBound news to talk about today, including BlockBound updates, new Steve and villager names, the Durlord skin, and a lot more. So just sit back, relax, and let's get into it. So first, let's talk about the document that Zoders released, talking about the current state of BlockBound's development. I know a lot of you guys, and honestly, me included, have been waiting for more teasers, more gameplay, just anything new about the game. And around 4 days ago, as of recording this, Zoders finally addressed everything in a full document explaining where the game is at right now and why things have been so quiet recently. And I'm not gonna lie, this actually clears up a lot, because before this, it just felt like everything went silent out of nowhere. Like we went from getting some teasers and information to basically nothing. And a lot of people started getting worried that something bad was happening behind the scenes. But according to him, that's not the case at all. So basically, the main thing he said is that BlockBound was announced way too early, like literally at the very start of development back in November. And because of that, it built up a ton of hype and expectations before the game even had much to show. So what ended up happening is that people were expecting constant updates, teasers, and progress. But behind the scenes, the game was still in a really early stage. And this is actually a big mistake that happens with a lot of games. When something gets announced too early, people expect progress way faster than what's realistically possible, especially for a game that relies heavily on systems and mechanics like BlockBound. And the thing is, he fully takes responsibility for that, which I actually respect, because not every developer would come out and admit something like that. Now, another thing he talked about is that early development wasn't smooth at all. There were internal issues, problems with developers, and the team just wasn't stable at the time. Some developers even got let go, which probably slowed things down even more. So yeah, it wasn't just them being quiet for no reason. There were actual problems happening in the background that we just didn't know about. And if you think about it, that explains a lot of the inconsistency we saw earlier. Like sometimes there would be updates, and then suddenly everything would go quiet again. It wasn't random, it was because the team itself wasn't fully stable yet. But here's where it gets better. Right now, he said the development team is stable and fully dedicated to the project. So the chaos from before is basically gone, and now they actually have a proper team working on the game consistently. And this is probably one of the most important updates from the entire document, because without a stable team, the game would honestly never reach a proper release state. So this is actually a really good sign. Now, the biggest reason why we haven't been seeing a lot of teasers lately comes down to one thing: scripting. He explained that they don't have multiple scripters working on gameplay at the same time, which means a lot of the core systems take way longer to build. And these aren't small things either. We're talking about stuff like ability systems, core mechanics, back-end logic, basically the foundation of the entire game. And this is where a lot of people misunderstand game development. Because from the outside, it looks like nothing is happening, but in reality, this is actually the most important phase. If the core systems aren't built properly, the whole game can break later on. So instead of rushing it, they're taking their time to make sure everything actually works the way it should. And the thing is, you can't really show that in a teaser. Like, they can't just post a clip of back-end logic or unfinished systems, because it wouldn't make sense to us and it wouldn't represent the game properly. Imagine seeing a half-working ability with bugs or missing animations. People would instantly think the game looks bad, even if it's just unfinished. So instead of showing half-finished content, they're choosing to stay quiet and work on everything behind the scenes until it's actually polished and ready to be shown. And honestly, I kind of agree with that approach. Because imagine they start posting random unfinished clips just to keep us entertained. It would probably just confuse people or make the game look worse than it actually is. First impressions matter a lot, especially for a game like this, and they clearly want their first real gameplay reveal to actually hit. He even mentioned that they could easily post stuff like animations or small sneak peeks like new Herobrine animation or new Jessie skin. But they're choosing not to do that because they want the first real look at the game to actually feel complete and represent the final product properly. So they're basically holding back content on purpose, but not in a bad way. It's more of a quality over quantity situation. Now, here's something that actually surprised me a lot. He said that most, if not all, of the release assets are already finished, and this includes characters like Entity 303, Herobrine, Jessie, Crafter, which is basically Steve, and Provisioner, which is the villager. And when he says finished, he means things like animations, sound effects, visual effects, and models are already done and ready. So visually, the game is pretty much there already. And that's actually crazy to think about, because it means if they wanted to, they could probably show a lot more right now. But again, they're choosing not to, because the gameplay systems aren't fully ready yet. And this is where everything connects, because even if all the assets are done, without proper scripting and systems, those assets can't really function properly in-game. So the main bottleneck right now isn't content, it's making everything work together smoothly. So overall, the game is actually progressing well, it's just that most of the progress is happening in ways that we can't see yet, which is why it feels like nothing is happening from our perspective. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from this entire document. They're not being lazy, they're not abandoning the game, and there's no drama going on. It's just that they're focusing on building the game properly instead of rushing it out or spamming teasers that don't actually represent the final product. And honestly, I'd rather have that than a rushed release that ends up disappointing everyone. So yeah, that's basically everything from the development update. And overall, this actually gives me a lot more confidence in the project moving forward, because now we actually understand what's going on behind the scenes instead of just guessing. But that's not all the news we have today, because we also got new information about Steve and villager names, plus the Durlord skin, which is actually really interesting. So let's move on to that. So in the document that Zoters sent, he actually gave us something small but really important, which is the official names for the Steve and villager characters in BlockBound. And this might not seem like a big deal at first, but there's actually a reason behind it. So if you guys didn't know, BlockBound basically has to follow a set of guidelines from Minecraft when it comes to using their assets, names, and overall branding. And these guidelines are actually pretty strict. They don't allow games to make it seem like they are officially connected to Minecraft, Mojang, or Microsoft in any way. So because of that, they can't just straight up call the characters Steve and villager in the game, at least not in a way that makes it look official or directly tied to Minecraft. They need to make it clear that this is their own project, even if it's inspired by Minecraft, and that's where the new names come in. So instead of Steve, the character is now called Crafter, and instead of villager, the character is called Provisioner. And honestly, these names actually fit really well. Like Crafter still clearly represents Steve and what he does, which is crafting, building, surviving, all of that. And Provisioner for the villager also makes sense because villagers are usually the ones trading, providing resources, and interacting with players in that way. So it keeps the identity of the characters, but also makes it unique enough to follow the guidelines properly. So yeah, small detail, but actually really important for the future of the game. Now moving on to something a bit more interesting, we might actually be getting a new skin. And this one is for Durlord. So recently there was a post talking about how Avery could possibly be added as a skin in BlockBound. And if you don't know, Avery is basically the character connected to Durlord. And this is where things start getting a bit more interesting, especially for people who follow ARGs and deeper lore stuff. And what makes this even more solid is that Zoters actually replied to this and said that Avery can probably be, and most likely will be, a skin for him. And that's pretty much as close to a confirmation as we can get right now. So this isn't just random speculation anymore. This actually has a really high chance of happening, which honestly fits the whole vibe of BlockBound really well. Now, of course, nothing is 100% confirmed yet until we actually see it in-game, but based on what was said, this is definitely something to keep an eye on. So overall, between the new character names and the potential Avery as a skin for Durlord, we're starting to see more of the direction that BlockBound is going in. They're not just copying things directly, they're adapting them, building on them, and slowly creating their own identity while still keeping that familiar feel. And that's actually a really good sign. And that is it. Thank you guys for watching all the way until the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video. Love you all.